Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Oh, come on, we can do better than that. Good morning. How is everybody today? Much better. We're excited to have you here for our one of our Centennial panel discussions. My name is Mark Murray, and I'm going to sort of be our MC today and keep these guys on task and then open it up for some questions and answers for you guys at the end. I'm very excited that we have both of these gentlemen with us today to talk a little bit about their careers in photography, where they got started, and what they think some of the things that you all should know about as high school journalists today. What's really great about both David and John is that they started exactly where you're sitting right now. They were both on their high school yearbook and publication staffs and worked as photographers and continued that up to present day. So I think it's really great that you guys are here to hear from them, to see some of their work. And so to get us started, I'm just going to turn it over to David first, who will tell you a little bit about himself. And let's start, and you know, who doesn't love throwback photos? So let's take a look at David as a high school student with his press pass. So there's your forward right there, and you should be all set.
Yeah. Cool. Great. I should have brought my glasses, reading glasses. Hi, how y'all doing? My name is David Berkwitz, and I'm a recovering photojournalist. And as you can see, I used to work on my high school newspaper and yearbook, and my unsung hero was my high school journalism teacher, Mr. Patterson. And I'm here to speak a little bit about my journey and share some images I've made since graduating from high school. And so basically, we're here to talk about storytelling. So basically, you have to do the thing. You have to get involved with your work. So if you work at the paper, or if you do a blog, you do a website, you do a TikTok. There's so much out there that needs content these days. So write as if your life depends upon it, because sometimes it will. Paying the rent or buying your friend a hot dog. But there are stories everywhere, and you don't need to travel. Everyone has a story to tell. I have some friends, David and Peter Turnley, who did a story on their hometown in Indiana when they were in high school. It's a wonderful book. One of them went on to win a Pulitzer, and together they've won every photo award around. You don't need to be on assignment. Just find something that interests you. Talk to people. Most importantly, listen to people. They may even be able to connect you to others, and your story and journey will continue. My grandfather, who went to NYU, loved to write and frequently sent articles that he'd written to the local paper, which occasionally they published. He wrote his own autobiography as well. I did it for myself, and because I found his fascinating stories just wonderful to read. And who wouldn't like to know more about growing up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and dealing with an upstate mobster named Legs de Coco? I still have his typewriter sitting on my shelf. It all starts with a story, and it can be anybody's story. I know in high school it's a lot about your friends, it's about the actors, it's about the football team. So when you go to college, you really focus on something totally different from what you have in high school. So, which is what I did. When I went to school at the School of Visual Arts, a couple months into my freshman year, I was listening to the radio, and they announced that John Lennon had been shot. And he was killed. I hopped on the subway to where the radio said people were gathering. It was at the Dakota, where John and Yoko lived. I spent the night taking not so great pictures, but I learned a lot about covering a story, and which was be prepared for the unexpected. I also realized that I love covering the news and showing people what I saw. I got a job out of college working at Newsweek magazine. And on my first day at Newsweek was the day that Mikhail Gorbachev came to town. He was the former head of the Soviet Union. Whoops, why is that wrong? Okay. Anyways, so Gorbachev decided that he was going to go to China in 1984. It was my first foreign trip. It was the pre-internet days, no emails. We used telex and dial-up modems. We photographed on film, which we processed in our 1-hour photo lab or in our bathrooms or in the AP lab. We transmitted over phone lines or did hand carries, which is going to the airport and trying to find someone to carry your film. The state visit was overshadowed by the death of a Chinese politician who called for some reforms and democratic measures for the people. The protests started small. The first days I was there, I walked to Tiananmen Square, and it was quiet. The second day, the protests took to the streets in small groups. After the protests grew, the state visit became an afterthought, and we focused on the protests instead of Mikhail Gorbachev. The protests lasted for about a month, and thousands filled the squares. This was my first big story. Talk about trial by fire. You can see how many thousands. Actually, the square holds 1 million people. You can imagine that. Many students, but there was also teachers and just regular people. They got the news out by writing and mimeographing it. They had hunger strikes. The people got really upset when they found out that the People's Army were going to come and try to take over the square. The populace seized the troop buses with guns and stopped the troops by surrounding them and stealing their shoes. A shoeless army can't fight. The next night, all hell broke loose. An APC was set on fire in front of the Mao portrait over the Gate of Heavenly Peace facing Tiananmen Square. My other Newsweek photographer, Charlie Cole, who photographed the famous Tank Man photo, one of them, and I made our way through the back streets on a pedal cab. As we passed by the APC, we saw a glimmer in the distance, troops in riot gear. They opened fire. We escaped into a nearby hotel. We were separated, and I wouldn't see him for a couple of days. I managed to hook up with some writers in a hotel room, and New York Newsweek magazine ordered me to get my film to the AP and process it. I was on the phone. I put my receiver out the window and let them hear the gunfire to let them know how bad it was. I made my way back to the AP, where I edited and transmitted images for almost 3 days straight. That was 18 minutes per image in those days. Not like airdrop. So we were the only magazine who had these scanners in the country, which turned out to be a little illegal. So, well, yeah, you start to learn what you can do and what you can't. I ended up a day later in the back of a hospital. A small crowd saw me and lifted me up to the second-story window and begged me to show what was going on there. They were horrified that the People's Army would fire on the people. So I photographed this makeshift morgue with a mother kissing her dead son. I evidently attracted some attention from inside the hospital. I had to run through the hutongs and little streets until my driver found me and got me out of there. A word of advice: never wear a red jacket on assignment. You won't blend in. The sights and sounds are still with me decades later. After that, I covered many other stories for Newsweek, from the war in former Yugoslavia and Bosnia, the end of it, back to Asia to cover elections in the Philippines and Indonesia, and then on to South Africa. This was a joyful story. The first vote in South Africa where everybody in the country could vote. I continued following Mikhail Gorbachev and the events that happened. in the Soviet Union and wherever he went. The first elections in the Soviet Union, they're basically free. Unfortunately, this man won, and he's the reason Putin is in office right now, Boris Yeltsin. But in telling a story, you try to show what's going on around you, not just the obvious. What's happening, how are things interacting? The former Soviet leader of the Soviet Union having to address people in a factory face to face, having to talk on a PA in a car instead of on a stage, the pomp, the circumstance of the Soviet Union. It was really great. On 9/11, I was woken up out of my sleep. The voice on the other end, it yelled at me to wake up and turn on the TV. A plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. All my gear was 7 blocks away in the Newsweek studio. I ran up and grabbed it, hopped on a train, got off at 14th Street and convinced someone getting on their motorcycle to give me a ride south. He said, I'm not going near there. He got me to the West Village where I ran with my gear, and strangely, I called my mother and got a voicemail and told her I was running to the fire, and I was so happy I had quit smoking because I was able to run and not cough up a lung. So these are my work from 9/11. So, Thank you all.
And now I'm pleased to introduce John Moore, who's going to show you some of his work, and then we'll wrap it up with some questions and answers.
Good morning. Nice to see you all. As Mark mentioned a little while ago, it's hard to imagine when you look up here and you see this guy with white hair being in the seat that you're in right now. But I promise you I was in the very same position many years ago. And you cannot imagine where you will be and where your life will take you. We all try to have a plan. It never really goes according to plan. However, if you're passionate about what you do and you care about what you do, there is a possibility that you'll get there. It may not be exactly what you think right now, but be open to it along the way. What I'm going to do is show you several series of pictures to give you an idea of what I've done over the years since I left the very same seats that you guys are in right now. A project I've been working on for, well, over 15 years now is on immigration to the United States. And I bring this up right now as the first story because it's such an important story in the news today. And one thing that got me sort of interested from the very beginning is the human drama and the evergreen nature of this story. When I say evergreen, what does that mean? It means that it is a story now, it was a story yesterday, and it will be forevermore. Immigration, during your lifetimes, you think, wow, it's a huge story right now. Well, because of the changes that are happening to the planet, both economically and with the climate, immigration is going to continue to be a major story. And if you think it's big now, just wait till you're my age, because it's not going to stop. When you have the inequities that exist in this world, you're going to have people who want a better life, and they're going to do whatever they have to do to get it. And there will be pushback against that, and we're seeing that happen right now in this country. So what I try to do in my pictures is to not just give you one image that tells 1,000 words, but give you context with other images that give that one image, for instance, a little bit more background. I spent a lot of time, the first part of my career, in Central America. I lived in Nicaragua, where this picture was taken. In fact, this is a very old photograph taken at a landfill where this mother had been searching for things to help to sell for her family. This picture was taken way back when I was, not so many years older than you guys are right now. And so I'll intersperse different pictures along the way. This is part of the context of why we have so much immigration to the U.S. The violence associated with the drug trade, especially in Latin America, but not only in Latin America. And so part of my coverage is to show a little bit of why people make this journey. These two 10-year-olds were killed when their parents, this is in Guatemala, in an indigenous community of Guatemala, when their parents could not pay a ransom when the kids were kidnapped. The parents could not pay the ransom, and the gangs executed the kids. And that is a type of thing, not only economic, but this type of violence is also what drives people up. This picture was actually taken along the way as people were on the journey coming from Central America, coming from Honduras, up trying to cross Guatemala into Mexico on the international bridge there. And the federal police, the federales, were trying to stop them along the way. Now, fortunately for me, I speak Spanish. I was based in Central America for 3 years, and then I was based in Mexico City some years later for almost 6 years. And so when I first went to that part of the world, my Spanish language my skills were very small. I was a kind of an American idiot, unable to communicate with people. But when you find yourself immersed in a culture, you figure it out pretty quick. And so I learned the language in Nicaragua, and then got better when I was in Mexico City. This is people on the journey. These are actually Haitians. Believe it or not, there was a large community of Haitian immigrants that were living in Chile, which is in far South America. And they had, people's stories are not easy. They're complex, People's lives are super complex. These folks had originally left Haiti when there was a massive earthquake that destroyed the capital of their country back in 2010. They went to Brazil. Why did they go to Brazil? Because Brazil was constructing stadiums for the World Cup and the Olympics. And so they had work to do there. But after the Olympics, Brazil did not experience an economic boom, but rather a huge crash because they'd spent so much money on the Olympics, they crashed their economy. And then people had no work. And so they went to Chile, which had a booming economy. And then eventually there was pushback, partly against immigration, like which happened in this country, and a conservative government came into power in Chile and revoked all the work visas for these folks. And so they came up towards the US. And this is where I photographed them, going through a place called the Darien Gap, which is an extremely difficult journey. Most of the way from South America all the way to the US, there are roads. But the Darien Gap between the countries of Colombia and Panama is one stretch of their journey where there are no roads whatsoever. You have to go through a jungle. It is extremely difficult physically. And I know that because I went on this journey with them. Now, I could only go halfway because going up to the Panamanian border in that jungle, I had some guides who actually helped me provide me with security. But once I would have crossed into Panama in a very dense and very remote jungle, gangs really control that area, and I would have immediately been robbed of my equipment and maybe worse. So I couldn't go the entire way. But I can tell you what, by the time I got up this mountain with these folks, I was at the back. I was at the very back of the group, trudging along with the pregnant ladies, because look, I ran a marathon, 15 years ago. You train for a marathon. You train months for a marathon. After you've run a marathon, you can probably run a half marathon without a huge amount of training, but it ain't easy. And this was basically a half marathon. And so I was destroyed by the time I got up this mountain. And plus, as you can see, there was no water there. People had to carry their water. Luckily, I had some porters carrying mine. This was also during the pandemic. As you can see, this guy's mask is quite worse for wear. And this next picture gives you an idea. When people talk, look, I've never looked at the immigration story as an invasion of this country. Personally, that's not the language that I've used. But some pictures lend themselves to that. For instance, this picture here. This is when a group of over 5,000 immigrants in what's called a migrant caravan crossed from Guatemala into Mexico. And because they all crossed together, they were all bunched together. And this is the kind of picture that lends itself to certain political certain political sides. Now, I don't consider myself political on this story. I try to cover this story in as many ways as possible, and I don't editorialize in my captions. I want people to come to their own decisions. I want to show what's happening, but I also want to show it with as much empathy as I can. And in the question and answer in a little while, in our panel, we'll talk a little bit more about that sort of stuff. This is what the U.S.-Mexico border looks like. Look, I was up in a helicopter with essentially Border Patrol officers. This pilot took me all over the border in an area called Big Bend, which is a really beautiful part of West Texas. And as you can see in this next picture, this guy looks like a soldier. He's not actually a soldier. He's a vigilante. In most states along the U.S.-Mexico border, Arizona and Texas in particular, California less so, New Mexico less so, there's the right to carry, right? So you can carry weapons. These guys can carry weapons, no problem. They say they were helping the U.S. Border Patrol. They were doing it out of sense of patriotism. Do I think they were useful at all? Not really. but they felt better doing it, whatever. This is a Texas National Guard soldier, also along the U.S.-Mexico border. As you can see, it's fortified with containers. But people who are desperate will do all sorts of desperate things to reach where they want to go. And this is crossing the river here, crossing the Rio Grande. That current is not super deep right there, but I tell you what, that current was very strong. And when they cross, people do carry clothes, dry clothes, in their backpacks to change into. And many people, these folks wanted to get caught because they're seeking political asylum in the U.S. This was about a year and a half ago. This is the end of 2023. And some other pictures here. In this photograph, I was with Border Patrol agents. I actually photographed this from the open door of a Black Hawk helicopter. They were chasing people who would come across. This guy. I do not think was an immigrant. He was probably a smuggler because he wanted to get away. Boy, did he want to get away. In fact, this Border Patrol agent did not catch him. He fell into those thorny mesquite bushes right there. And it took 3 other agents to catch this fellow. He was like an incredible athlete. He didn't get away, but boy, he made a good run of it. But always, I try to photograph with an eye to having some empathy and showing the human side of the story. You know, when we talk about 1,000 words, this photograph here, you know, I had many questions, and I still do, because I was not able to interview this couple. Where did they come from? Did they come together, or did they meet along the way? Did they only come together when they were captured by U.S. Border Patrol agents in handcuffs? This woman was caressing his hand with you can see her painted fingers there. It was a tender moment. And when they rounded people up, these folks for asylum, this is what it looks like along the river. But inevitably, a lot of people end up in detention, especially right now. What's happening in the country right now is historically unique in that it's not just a couple people. Millions of people are being rounded up. It's quite a historic moment. It's difficult to photograph because access can be difficult. But that's part of what I do, is to get access into difficult areas. This child was from Honduras. Actually, he was from Guatemala, locked up in a family detention center. This picture was taken only a few months ago on the U.S.-Mexico border there in Southern California. This group actually are folks from China. They had come in at night in the rain, and a humanitarian worker had given them ponchos, and it was cold, it was rainy. The pictures, it was very dark. It was so dark that I was hand-holding my camera, but a lot of the pictures are blurry. This one was not. And this picture got a lot of attention, and we'll talk about pictures of impact later, but keep this picture in mind when we have that discussion. And right now, deportations are happening en masse. This fellow is being deported to Guatemala. And in fact, I was able to get on that flight with ICE at the time. ICE doesn't give that kind of access now, but at the time I had very good connections and was able to fly with them back to Guatemala. Now I'm going to show you a few other pictures from different stories I've worked on over the years. This image here was from the U.S. invasion of Iraq during that war. I was embedded, it was called being embedded with U.S. military forces. And so I was traveling with them for over 2 months. I was eating with them, I was traveling with them, I was sleeping in the same area with them, usually outside. These guys had just captured a palace. This photograph became an early meme at the time as well. Just because of just the body language, everything about conquering forces. But as the U.S. forces discovered, and this picture for just warning, next picture is tough. This soldier was, they were trying to save his life. The guy on top of him was a major, but he was a nurse, the head of the nurses unit at a combat hospital, and they were trying to save the life of this soldier who had suffered catastrophic wounds in what's called an IED attack, improvised explosive device. The U.S. military captured many thousands of people as part of the insurgency that quickly grew. The American forces thought it would be easy. Actually, winning the initial war and the invasion was easy, but then what came afterwards was not so easy. And they imprisoned many people, many of them who were guilty, many of them who were not. And this person was in solitary confinement. Eventually, they started allowing prisoners to see their family members, and this mother is coming to visit her son. But many of the pictures from conflicts are pictures that are well behind the front lines. This photograph I took back at our national cemetery, Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of D.C. I was walking through this cemetery. I had not been there before. It's called... At the section, I think section 66, it's part of the cemetery where the new casualties were buried. And this woman was visiting the grave of her fiance who had been killed several months before. She had been there for the funeral, but this is the first time she'd gone back to visit the grave, and it was Memorial Day weekend. You know, people ask, wow, was that really invasive for you to be there? Sometimes what we do can be invasive. In this particular case, it wasn't really. I had gone up and I had seen her by the grave, and had actually gone up and talked with her. Mary McHugh was her name. We'd had a conversation. We talked for a while about her story and her fiance's story. And then later, when I walked back by, she was there at the grave, speaking into the cold marble. Some pictures from Pakistan. I was based in Pakistan for 3 years. It was a very tumultuous time. During that time, one of the stories I did was out on the border with Afghanistan. And these folks are Bukti and Mari tribal members who live there in that remote area. Now, these folks, you know, when we think of black turbans, some people say, oh, they're Taliban. Well, these guys are not Taliban. They were actually fighting against the Pakistani government for autonomy in their province. And I was back at that point. I still had color in my hair. That's me with some of these rebels up in the mountains. And they put rockets on the back of camels. In the background, you can see a black bag. Well, that was actually my satellite phone, which went on that camel as well. This was the tribal shaman who they relied upon to plan their route for a combat mission. And what was he planning it with? He was using the shoulder bone of a goat, which they'd used for soup the night before. At one point, they stopped the convoy of, I was on horseback actually, we were all on horseback, but they had camels carrying our stuff. They stopped and they started taking stuff down, and they said, well, we're going to attack this Pakistani garrison in the distance. I could barely see it, it was far away. And I was like, really? And they were like, well, we have a couple ways that we can do it. I said, oh really? They said, well, we can get closer to them and set up this rocket, but if we get closer, they can fire back at us, their weapons can reach us. Or we can fire back from back here, and it won't be as accurate, but we'll be safer back here. And I said, okay. And they said, well, where should we fire from? And I was like, whoa, don't ask me. You don't have to fire at all. It's not up to me. You don't have to fire at these guys. It's not about the pictures. I'm here to tell a story. And they're like, all right, well, we'll fire from here. And so they shot these weapons, and sure enough, the Pakistani forces shot back, and everything fell about a half a mile short. I'll show a few more pictures from Pakistan. These are Pakistani Taliban. It's very difficult for Western photographers to photograph them without getting kidnapped. But I had a very good contact, a very good source who was trusted and actually guaranteed my security. So I was able to get in. This particular series here is of Islamic students who were protesting against Western influence. I know that sounds a little weird, but they were burning DVDs and videos at the time. We don't have those anymore. Even The Lion King went up in flames. The Lion King, poor Lion King. And at this moment here, the flames are in the background. These guys are screaming at me. They're screaming death to America. This guy looks like he's going to bite me, right? And after it was over and everyone calmed down, this guy in the middle comes up to me and says, well, where are you from? I said, well, I thought, you know, I'm not going to pretend to be Canadian. Nope, I'm not going to do that. I said, well, actually, I'm American. And he looked at me with these steely eyes, and I didn't know what he was going to say. And he says, you must be knowing my brother Mushtaq. He's a taxi driver in Detroit. Wow, didn't expect to hear that. But sometimes what you see is theater. And sometimes people do mean what they say, but they don't necessarily have anything against you. And that's an important thing to remember for me, is that it's not always personal. And just a couple other photos before we go into our panel session here. This, because it's in the news, this photograph is from the front line of the war in Iraq, the Russian-Ukrainian war. I've been there twice in the last few years. This is a Russian soldier who had died on the front line. We try to photograph things in ways which are not gruesome. We try to tell the story in ways that people can understand and are not completely repelled by. You have to get people's attention, and they have to look at your pictures long enough to learn something. People get exposed to so many pictures every day. You have to get their attention, but you don't want to repel them. These students at the playground survived, but the school did not. This man was still living in his home, even though it had been destroyed by shrapnel. And this couple was living on the front line. You could hear the booms in the background. It was happening. The explosions were happening, but people still have to continue to live their lives. And that country is really tired of war. I hope they're able to come up with a peace where everyone can live with, because it's been a long 3 years. And that's all for me right now. Thank you very much.
So here's what we're going to do. I've got one or two questions that I'm going to sort of pose to him, and then we'll open it up and give you guys some time. We do want to try and get everybody out of here by about 11:45 because we've got other things scheduled for in here. But again, let me start by thanking both David and John for being here and sharing some of their work with you guys. I hope you've enjoyed that. So I'd put together several questions I shared with them, but here's the one I'm going to specifically pose to them right now. If you could go back in time and offer your high school self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, it's something that I try to remember, and even to this day, on a daily basis, I often forget, which is to live in the moment and to be aware of what is going on around you at all times. Because the truth is, we miss far more pictures than we make. We walk by stuff all the time that's incredibly interesting, incredibly artistic, incredibly insightful, and we're caught up in our own world. Try to be in the moment, and you will see pictures all around you. You don't have to be in Ukraine. You'll see pictures all around you that are worth making. That's that. I try to tell myself it's easy to forget to do that. Keep it in your mind. Live in the moment. Keep your eyes open. Don't be blind. The biggest problem for photographers is blindness, not physical blindness, but just blindness to what's happening around us. See what's happening around you, and pictures will be all over the place. You can't miss them if you keep your eyes open.
Yeah, I'll second that. And also, one other thing is to, as you're going through your journey, you're trying to work on a story, and doors close in front of you, and people are always saying no. And one thing that I learned, we were just talking about this before, is never take no for an answer. There's almost always a way to get around that no. That person saying no, you don't have to be nasty about it, but there's a way to get around that, to get into your story, especially if it's a story that's dear to you, or it's an important story for everybody else. But don't take no for an answer. And the other thing is, always carry a camera. Well, you're very lucky because you have one in your pocket now all the time. But I feel that you at least I see differently if I'm carrying a camera as just opposed to carrying my phone all the time. But even though I'm using this a lot more now on the streets when I'm running around. But be aware, carry a camera, take a lot of photographs, you know. It's not just a job, it's a lot of fun too. So.
Who has some questions for either of these guys? I don't know, my hearing aids turned up. All right, say that one more time. And say one more time. So the question is the rule that you can't interview so that you don't become a part of the story something that you intervene? Thank you.
Oh.
In terms of your role as a photojournalist?
Okay, microphone. It depends. I mean, if it's like a life or death situation, or someone's starving in front of you, I mean, you're going to have to weigh that. I had in a different sort of situation where if you're covering protests and that kind of a thing, to not get involved. You shouldn't be an activist, journalist. But if you're in a situation where someone's hurt or something like that, put your cameras down. I was in South Africa during the first vote, and an old lady came out of the car, out of a taxi, crawled on her hands and knees to go vote for the first time. And an AP photographer and I, Greg English, we were with each other. He put his cameras down, he ran, he picked her up and put her under a tree. So, you have to have a heart, you have to have empathy. So.
I think it's definitely on a case-by-case basis, right? If people if there's no one else there to help, and you can do something to help someone, absolutely you gotta you know. But oftentimes in places where I am, there are some sort of medical personnel, or there's activists, or there's people who are dedicated to helping folks in ways that I can't even do. And so, yes, be a human being first. That's priority. But oftentimes, there's so much need that oftentimes the pictures that I take will have more impact than me spending my whole day trying to source water for this group of 1,000 people. The pictures that I transmit, because I don't just photograph for myself or for Instagram, I'm photographing for a company that distributes those photos around the world. So my pictures can have a lot of impact. Like, for instance, let me give you one example. The picture of the little girl crying as her mother was being body searched there on the border. That picture had a huge amount of impact around the world, because at the time it was called the zero tolerance policy of the first Trump administration on the border, and people were concerned about family separations. Right? And so that picture lent itself to that story. Fortunately, that family was not separated, which I was very relieved to hear later on. But pictures sometimes, when they're in the right moment, can have a lot of impact far beyond what I could physically do to help someone in the moment. So it's a balance, and it's on a case-by-case basis. Okay, the question is, how do we deal with the tough stuff that we see and photograph? In my case, look, if I feel that my pictures can have some impact and can potentially do some good, that is where I get my strength, right? That gives me strength to carry on and do more, and that I feel I have a purpose. That's the main thing. If I felt that what I was doing was just for my portfolio or useless, I don't think I could do it. The pictures, I'll mention this, the pictures that affect me most personally are the pictures of children suffering. That's tough for me. You know, I'm a dad. Even before I was dad, that's super tough. And I have to, sometimes fight through the motions to continue photographing, because I do think what I do matters. And so that's what sustains me, I think.
I'll definitely echo that. And I mean, I know that sometimes you get into situations like, 9/11. It was years before I remembered how I got back from Ground Zero up to 57th Street to Newsweek's office. I didn't remember how I got from point A to point B. And finally, it came back to me. It was on a flatbed. But there are times when you see things that are just horrifying, and like John said, you're sort of doing something. I mean, you like to feel it's for the greater good, or to advance something that's good. So, and friends, family, good therapist also helps. So.
All right, time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that in a lot of the pictures, like in 9/11, like with Pakistan, like you mentioned that you were in like a helicopter taking these really close pictures. You guys are near a lot of active, like dangerous environments. I'm curious, like if you guys have ever been like really concerned for your safety, like the man that was asking me about like where's the fire or something, like that's a really dangerous environment. I'm just wondering how secure you guys really feel in those situations, if you guys are ever worried about like your own safety.
You take that.
Yes, plenty. Every situation is different. In war zones, especially combat zones, it's very unpredictable. And so, look, it's all a matter of risk and reward. There are lots of times where I've seen a picture in the distance that was going to be an amazing picture, an incredible picture. I didn't have the lens for it. I would have to get close to it, and I decided it wasn't worth it. Many, many occasions where I've decided the picture wasn't worth it. And following my instincts over time, I think has kept me more safe than I would be otherwise. That said, I have friends who I've lost in this profession, people who've died, who were also made intelligent, informed decisions, and they just had bad luck. I'll mention this, take it at face value. Most journalists in fact, international workers, but most journalists who are injured in working internationally, especially in war zones, but not only in war zones, most of them are injured in motor vehicle accidents, not by bullets and not by bombs. They're injured because they didn't wear a seatbelt. They're injured because they're driving too fast. They're injured because they rolled over into a canal and they drowned. Wear a seatbelt. And a helmet if you need to.
No, I said that's really, yeah, but-
All right, one more question.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking for like more of an academic standpoint, how, when you really take the pictures of like the images and how they're really falling eyes on they're looking at the camera, do they ever kind of get upset at you for taking photos of them like stretching down and like, I mean, just like, I feel like from my point of view, obviously I'm not in that situation.
Right.
I'm saying if I was crying about something that was going on, I don't think I would want someone to take pictures of me. So, but that's just me. But I'm saying, do they ever get upset at you?
Sure. The question is, do people get upset when I'm taking pictures of quiet, intimate moments, when people are very vulnerable? The answer is, I'm always in touch with people. I talk to folks. I like to talk to folks either when I'm photographing them or beforehand. It's not like I'm getting written permission, but when people indicate that they don't want their picture taken, I just don't take. If it's a spot news environment and things are crazy, okay, that's one thing. But when it's a more quiet environment, and people don't want their picture taken, I just don't take it. There's so many pictures that I don't have. Usually the tender moments that you see, I've talked to folks. Look, your pitch, and this can work for you guys too, not just me. What you say, and you go into any situation and you talk to anyone that you want to photograph, you say this: look, I think what's happening here is important, and I don't think a lot of people understand why. If it's okay, I'd like to hang out and try to show people what it's really like. Use that for whatever you do. It doesn't always work. Some people don't want their picture taken, but oftentimes it will. Give the people you photograph some agency, and they will often want you along for the ride. Thank you all very much.
Just have one thing. I just wanted to say one thing. You know, as you look, and I also see great to see so many women in here. If you guys want to on Instagram, because I know everyone's on Instagram, there are a couple of photographers you might want to beside John. There's a wonderful woman photographer, Youngie Kim, and who's just like doing the protests right now and just doing amazing stuff. If you look her up and follow her, Paula Bronstein, who's follow and look and see who they follow. If you like someone's work, follow the other photographers and see what they're doing for stories. It's great to just see. That's one of the most important things. It's like, you know, reading a book or something. It just gets you into the, maybe gets you to the mood or sparks some ideas. But, you know, you got to be sort of in it to win it, I guess is the way to put it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.